Faith works. This is the message of James, that we, in our own ability, cannot stand in the face of adversity. We could never find the strength to trust without faith. Because we don't have the capability to see above the trials that we meet, to keep our eyes focused on the King while counting the situation we are currently experiencing as joy. Faith works. This is the essence of James. We don't work to be saved. We work because we are saved. Without faith, without works, we too quickly become that man in the mirror staring at his face, but then forgets the way he looks as soon as he turns away. But with faith, with works, we stay steadfast on this journey, progressively sanctified, knowing we'll be perfected once we reach the other side. Faith works. This is the cry of James, that faith apart from works can never be sustained, that in every day and in every way we should see this truth proclaimed, because it's faith that makes us doers of the word, not just hearers. It's faith that keeps us humble, not proud. It's faith that directs our tongues to bless, not to curse. It's faith that causes us to show mercy, not judgment. It's faith that leads us to true religion, not its empty substitute. And it's faith that's causing us to preach the good news to every tribe, tongue, and nation with every breath that we breathe. And it will be faith that causes us to worship our God for all eternity. This is the message of James. Faith works.
And welcome back to our study of James. My name is Kyle Gatlin. We're going to pick up right where we left off last week. Actually, we're going to pick up a couple of verses where we stopped last week, and we'll go and see how far we can go tonight. But it doesn't matter how far we go, because we'll always have next week to come back to. So we're actually, James chapter 4, verse 8, it sort of hit on this last week at the very end, and look at it again. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. That's where James is reminding us, okay, that as we're seeking to live more like Christ, we draw near to God. And when we're trying to do that, he's drawing near to us. He's also reminding us that we have to cleanse ourselves, actually. We wash our hands, you sinners. In other words, understand that there's something going on in our life, has been going on in our life, where we need forgiveness, we need to repent, and when we do that, we wash our hands that way. He talks also about purifying our hearts, because our actions are directly resulting of what we're thinking. So we gotta work on the way we think. And as we think through things, we try to get them right the way God wants us to get them right, and that leads to better action. And then he says in verse 9, grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. And actually, this is the last thing I mentioned last week. Why we grieve, mourn, and wail. Why do we grieve, mourn, and wail? Well, that's about the actions that we have taken. We grieve over them. We grieve over the actions that have caused harm to others because of what we have done that is wrong in the eyes of God. We mourn over that. We wail over that. And so that weighs on us. And then he leads us into this next verse, which is sort of kicks us off to where we want to go. Sort of like we focus on this verse, and then we're going to look and see how that plays out. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. So as we have worked to purify our minds, we wash our hands, we've asked for forgiveness, then he says, this is the way you need to live your life. You humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Now, you can go a lot of different ways with what humble means, but I think, based on James and how he's writing, I think he's going to lead us into what humility looks like through our actions. And I think that is going to play out in these next verses. Because look at what he said. Basically, he's answering the question, I think. It's just my interpretation. How do you be humble? How are you humble in your lives? And I think he's leading, particularly when he goes to verse 11, he's talking about this community, this Christian community of people that are following Jesus, but probably are not living a life of humility, a life that's humble before God, because he challenges them and says this: brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. So, again, he's writing to people who are fighting within themselves, fighting within the quote-unquote church at this time. And so they're infighting. They're bickering with each other. And, really, in our world, and actually sort of in our denomination, I would rather be known for what I'm for rather than what I'm against. And so I think this is what he's alluding to, that these people are slandering another person. In other words, they're against another person, and they're saying things about them. And he was really challenging me. He said, that's really not the humble life. That's not the life God's calling you to. That's not a life that is one that begins with a purified mind. It's not one that's wailing and grieving over your actions that have hurt others. And he's trying to reel them back in here and saying, people need to know what you're for, not who you're against. And that has been a struggle in our denomination, and really because of the circumstances, really worldwide. We're not going to take up this discussion until the fall of 2021. But I think, and the way I'm sort of reading the tea leaves from hearing other people, that what we're going to do is probably learn to respect each other. We might go our different ways, but we're not going to talk bad about each other. I think that's what we're leaning to right now, truthfully, in our church. But we're just going to humble ourselves, not talk bad about the other group of people or other people, but just understand that we have our differences, but in humility go forward. Go forward with the way that we love Jesus, the way that we worship Jesus, and the way we point people to Jesus. That's what I think, okay? And that's where I think where a lot of us continue to struggle. See, we don't struggle with murder or stealing or coveting or whatever, but we might struggle in this humble thing, and that might lead us to say, in judgment, talk about other people, and to slander other people because, I'm not a murderer, I'm not a thief, I'm not an adulterer, I'm not jealous over anybody else, and so I'm not doing those things, but I'm still sitting in judgment by talking bad about another person. Another person, by the way, that is seeking in their own life to follow Jesus themselves. And so, and we're in danger of that right now, in my opinion. We're in danger of that as we watch the news, as we look at so many different people around our country. We're in danger of sitting in judgment of them. And we see people through the news and reports or whatever, the way that they are talking or whatever, I think they're representing Jesus Christ. I think many of them are, because Jesus wants everybody to be loved, everybody he wants everybody to follow him. Everybody wants Jesus wants all people to follow his example in accepting and loving and offering grace for all. And so I think, and we're sitting here in judgment so many times of other people when we are not there. And truthfully, I think we need to take a step back, truthfully, and figure out what it means for us to be humble in the situation that we find ourselves in, but particularly within our own church and with our own church community, understand what it means to live a humble life and not sit in judgment of another person. Verse 12, there is one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? So, I mean, James is really just putting it out there. It's not your responsibility. It's not your job. There's only one person, and that's God. God has that ability to judge others, okay? So a number of scholars, truthfully, will stop right here with verse 12, and then they break up their study and they start looking, and then at verse 13 as sort of a new thought. But I think it really could be a continuation. I really think this is more of a continuation of what it means to humble ourselves before God. Because it just makes sense to me. And we're going to read verses 13 through 17 and then come back, because I think these verses, they sort of mesh together, and you'll see. Listen and read along with me. Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. So it really closes up with a reminder of how to live humble and understand this is what humility is. But this whole passage, I believe, speaks to getting away from an arrogant lifestyle and more of a humble lifestyle. And we need to remember this. I think these verses sort of remind us that life is uncertain. That life is uncertain. And I think you realize this, and James pretty well throws it out there, that life is uncertain. On March 10th this year, I was certain that all the way through mid-April, I would umpire about 3 afternoons and 3 nights a week. I was certain that on Easter Sunday, over 2,000 people would show up for worship services on our campus. And I was certain that on April 14th at 11 p.m., I would still be doing my taxes. And I was certain that in the month of April, that there would be 2 wedding receptions that I would be going to celebrate 2 beautiful brides getting married. Of course, we know that did not happen. Yes, the beautiful brides did get married, but there was no reception for me to go to. All right? But why did these things not happen? Well, life is uncertain. Life is uncertain. What are you planning to do tomorrow? What's your next week look like? What's your next month look like? What about next year? What does that look like? So how far do your plans go out? Is it a sin to have plans? No, it's not. The Bible actually talks a lot about planning. Proverbs talks a ton about how wise people seek good counsel and make wise plans. Is it a problem to have a schedule and to have things organized in advance? No, it's not. It's not a sin to have a vision. It's not a sin to make a plan. It's not a sin to be organized. So what's the problem? Let's go back to verse 13. Today or tomorrow, we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. These are business plans. These are business plans that the people in James' audience are making. But look what he says about in verse 14. You do not know what tomorrow will bring. You do not know what will even happen. You would not even know what will happen tomorrow. And that's the issue. Now we're going to skip the rest of verse 14 and go right to verse 15. Instead, all you ought to say, it is the Lord's will we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes, and all such boasting is evil. See, what these folks have said is, we're going to do this. And James is saying, wait a second, what about the Lord? Where's the Lord? He's basically saying it's better to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. And then he actually says, but what you do, you're doing this in arrogance. You're making plans with your arrogant attitude. And that arrogant attitude is evil, because that arrogance is really the opposite of being humble, isn't it? The problem is not when we have vision. It's not when we have hope. It's not when we have a dream. It's not when we have a plan. That's not the problem. The problem is when it doesn't include the Lord. The problem is when we plan out of arrogance and not humility. It's seeking our will, not God's will. That's the problem. He tells them, you boast in arrogant schemes. And I think we can do this. We're susceptible to doing this. Yeah, next year I'm going to graduate. Next year I'm going to get married. Next year I'm going to get a job. Next year I'm going to start a family. Next year I'm going to get out of debt. Next year. We always say next year. We make these plans, and we need to be careful, because we need to remember, if the Lord wills, because we have to remember it's about humility. And what James, I think, is attacking here is really two awful assumptions and presumptions. One is in regard to sovereignty, okay? The other is in regard to separation. The problem is that it's easy for us to behave or believe that we are sovereign over our lives, and we're sovereign over our future. And if you find someone who's a visionary, who is a leader, they're an organizer, they want to drive the engine, okay? They can talk with great certainty about what they're going to do. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And this is the way it's going to be. This is how we're going to do it. And the impression can be from that person that they are sovereign, that they're in charge, that they're all-knowing, that they're in God's seat, that they see tomorrow, that they know what tomorrow brings, but they're not sovereign. But they don't know what the future holds. See, as a believer in Christ, as a Christ follower, our relationship with Jesus affects everything. It affects how we do business. In a few weeks, it will affect how we vote. It affects how we behave. It affects how we interact with others. It affects how we see the world. It affects how we spend our money, how we organize our day, what we consider our priorities as a Christian. Because we're not sovereign, Jesus is, and the relationship with Jesus, following Jesus, affects everything. We don't know about tomorrow. We really don't. Jesus does. You know, Annie believes the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and I have a pretty good hunch that the sun will come up tomorrow, because it's come up every other day recently, and it shines in my window and wakes me up. So I'm pretty sure it's going to come up, but I don't know that for 100% sure. Not the 100% sure that Rob Manfred said about Major League Baseball coming back. That's a different 100%, but have an idea. We don't know about tomorrow. Jesus does. And our life is not separated into things that involve Jesus and things that don't. As sovereign Lord, he rules over all history, over all nations, over all cultures, over all nations, over all of life. And really what James is saying here is don't live your life like an atheist while attending church. And he says that's sort of what you guys are doing, okay? The language and the goal setting and the planning is exactly the same as a person who does not believe in God. He's pressing them on this. He's challenging on this. God's not factoring in their equation at all. God's not factoring into any part of what they're getting ready to do, what they're planning to do. They sort of figure out, they predict the future, they get their best estimation, they get their best organizational alignment they can come up with, they set goals, and they go forward. And James says it would be far better if if they realized, if we realize that things will only happen if the Lord wills. If the Lord wills. You know, there's people out there that are watching this, that you're a driver, you're active, you're a planner, you're a get stuff done type of person. And James is saying, because you don't know tomorrow, let me ask a question. Is James saying, because you don't know tomorrow, to don't plan anything, to don't pursue anything? Is that what he's saying? No. Actually, he's just saying, put it in pencil. Put it in pencil. Pursue your plans humbly. You know, put your plans out there with an open hand, not a closed hand. He's saying, this is not, my plans are right here. I got them wrapped up. I'm ready to go. No, he's saying, I got my plans right here. But they're open because it's whatever the Lord wills. If he wills, it will happen. It will happen. So, and there are some of you that may be on the opposite end. You're going, this is great. I'm not a planner. I am not a person that tries to do all this stuff and organize stuff. This is my life verse. I don't have to plan anything. Whatever the Lord wants, whatever the Lord wills, right? You're a happy-go-lucky, sarah type person, right? But that's not what it says either. It doesn't say just blindly take a step of faith. It's just saying, make your plans with an open hand. If the Lord wills, keep going forward, right? The goal for us is for this to be a conviction. This will be a conviction if the Lord wills. It's basically saying, I have sought the Lord, I have sought wise counsel, I've prayed, and I've planned. And I believe to the best of my understanding that what I am planning on doing is right in the sight of the Lord and what the Lord has for me to do. But I could be wrong. Therefore, the Lord is welcome to change my plans because his will overrides my will. And I trust that his will is glorious for him and good for me. And what that allows for us to do, it allows for those who are more active in planning, it allows for humility to come in to our lives. It opens us up to understand what being humble is all about. And for those of us that are passive, it allows us to have more confidence. You know, because we can get into trouble when we say, the Lord said, let's do this, and then he changes the circumstances. We can get in trouble for that. And so you're stuck. You're stuck if you start saying, well, the Lord said I need to do this, and then the circumstances change, and he wills something else. He directs something else. And you're stuck, and you're like, okay, well, do I lose credibility by saying we're going to change the plan, or do I march forward without the Lord? The way out of it is humility, and to say, I believe this is the best. The Lord can change his plan for us, but as now, this is what we're doing and where we're going. And you know what? You can say, I think this is right, and if it's not, I'm inviting the Lord in to direct my steps. More humility for the confident, and more confidence for those who are humble to proceed together into the will of the Lord. If the Lord wills, that's the first principle in this passage that he's talking about. Life is uncertain, but if the Lord wills. Okay? Now, next week, we're going to go back and start with this verse that says, a mist, we are like a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. We're going to start out and talking about that verse and finish up chapter 4 next week. I promise we'll do it next week. I knew we wouldn't get very far today, but I can't get started in this next part without going way too long. So we're going to pick this up next week. we'll finish out chapter 4. I promise. Scout's honor, whatever Scout is, that Scout's honor. I think that's Scout's honor. We're going to finish up chapter 4 next week, and then I believe then that leads us into maybe the first Wednesday of July. We got something special going on. We're getting ready to announce. So we're going to finish up chapter 4 next week, and then into July we'll pick back up and finish out the book of James, hopefully in the month of July. God bless you. Continue to stay safe. Just remember to be cognizant of others. And it's not all about you. Right? If you don't remember anything else tonight, remember to humble ourselves. And when we humble ourselves before God, we're humbling ourselves as representatives of Jesus Christ. And what would Jesus do? And Paul tells us, don't put a stumbling block in front of anybody. And so in this age we're living in, when no matter what we say, we can get in trouble, let's do our part to stay safe and also to protect others just in case. So if you have to wear a mask a few more times a day, please wear a mask. If you don't have to get close to somebody, you can wave at them from 6 feet away, do that. We are trying to best to model that at our church. When you come to worship in person with us on Sundays, we try our best to model that because we want to protect you in addition to protecting anybody else that may be coming through our doors. So wherever how you join us this weekend, you're welcome. You're welcome online. You're welcome on Facebook. You're welcome in person. And just allow God to lead you in these days and months ahead to be humble and also to honor Him and worship Him with our whole life. Have a great night. Peace and blessings.